Welcome to Forthright, Reader Feedback Edition, and this time the first feedback will come from me. The online heading was one that I had suggested, but the print edition headline was 180 degrees off course. The print edition headline? Trying to make electric-only heating controversial. There's no trying about it. It was already controversial. And this was especially odd in an edition where a front page above the fold news article outlined the areas of controversy by interviewing both sides. Here's the column as it appeared in the online edition under the headline, Government by Experts or by Legislators. In 2021, Spokane adopted an updated Sustainability Action Plan. The most contentious item in the plan was a proposal to require electric heat pumps as the default systems for commercial buildings and to ban new natural gas hookups starting in 2023. City Council President Brian Beggs affirmed his opposition to a 2023 ban in interviews with the Spokesman Review in May and July 2021, saying, quote, City Council has no plans to restrict natural gas. It's not a real issue currently, it's really just an issue to get people riled up, end quote. Plenty of people were riled up, and the requirement was dropped before the City Council adopted the final version of the Sustainability Action Plan. Meanwhile, buried in the State Building Code Council minutes, the proposed Washington State Energy Code includes precisely the same ban at a statewide level. As part of the code adoption process, more than 7,000 Washingtonians signed into Zoom meetings or submitted written comments. One of those letters, dated March 11, reads, quote, we, the undersigned local elected officials, write to strongly urge the SBCC to adopt a commercial energy code that aligns with the climate and sustainability goals that we have established at the local and state level. Specifically, we support a statewide commercial energy code for new construction that requires electric heat pump technology for water and space heating and eliminates fossil fuels from these appliances. End quote. It was signed by Brian Beggs, Spokane City Council President. So, an obvious question. How did Beggs come to sign a letter supporting a statewide ban on natural gas in commercial and multifamily projects after calling it not a real issue in Spokane? In an interview recorded April 14, Beggs said, my interpretation of that letter was that over the next 25 years that has to happen, end quote, and that he was opposed to a ban on natural gas in just a few years. In Washington, codes are adopted on a 3-year cycle by the members of the governor-appointed State Building Code Council and go into effect the following year. Electric-only space heating and water heating would go into effect statewide July 1, 2023 if adopted. So the next obvious question, would Beggs be withdrawing his support? He responded via email with a statement reading in part, quote, I recently read the language of a proposed new WAC section 5111C 40314 that is now proposed to go into effect statewide in 2023 and wasn't included in the letter. Just like I did not support a proposed mandate of electric only in commercial buildings in Spokane taking effect in 2023, in Spokane's comprehensive sustainability plan, I don't personally support this WAC taking effect as written in 2023, end quote. I wonder how many of those other 80 former and current city and county officials from around the state didn't know what they were signing. It's too late for revised testimony, but not too late to lobby the Code Council members directly. They'd be hearing from constituents if they were legislators debating policies with this kind of impact, but they aren't elected. Quote, this body is not accountable to anybody, said Spokane County Commissioner Al French, an architect who serves on the 15-member Code Council. Not to the public or the legislature. They can make decisions without being held accountable for consequences. Close quote. Pushing controversial energy measures through state and local building codes is part of a calculated strategy by the Rocky Mountain Institute to bypass both state legislatures and national data-driven consensus engineering standards. RMI has discovered their decarbonization agenda is easier to sell using what they describe as a powerful tool from, quote, the unglamorous pages of local and state law book, end quote. Legislatures are inconveniently public. Another quote from Al French. The governor is doing everything he can to pass his agenda and bypass the legislature, said French, who fills the slot reserved for an Eastern Washington County elected official. One everything Governor Inslee has done is fill all the seats on the council. In February, there were 5 lame ducks, 1 seat that had been vacant for at least 3 years, and 2 appointees whose appointment had been challenged in court. As of this month, 2 of the lame ducks have been reappointed, 3 have been replaced, the long vacant seat reserved for someone representing those with disabilities has finally been filled, and the governor has settled the lawsuit. Inslee lost on the long-term principle, but won this week's battle. His hand-picked appointees have to resign, but not until after the critical April 22nd council meeting. Whether the brand new members trying to catch up on a year's worth of testimony should recuse themselves is a question French will raise at the meeting. Katie Sheehan of Spokane's Community Building, one of those new members, may be hearing from Council President Beggs, as well as a few other not-quite constituents eager to bring her up to speed. A little bit of follow-up to that column. Brian Beggs did send a letter to all members of the Building Code Council clarifying that he was not in favor of a 2023 ban. It's really a little bit late for that, but he did make the attempt. And I was not the only reader to react with astonishment to the editor's choice to headline that column, "Trying to Make Electric-Only Heating Controversial." Toby Nixon, a former state legislator currently serving on the Kirkland City Council, reacted like this. Egads, what a biased headline. Comes across as an accusation that you're trying to create a controversy where none exists. The controversy over trying to eliminate natural gas cooking and heating definitely exists and has for a very long time. The controversy you're highlighting is elected officials disingenuously stating one position locally and advocating a very different position elsewhere, such as to the legislature, Congress, or regulatory agencies, trying to have it both ways. Well, darn, it isn't my fault you can't have a gas range, those evil state regulators. A big light needs to be shown on that kind of prevarication. Thank you for doing it. Appreciate the feedback from Toby. I respect his opinion as an advocate for open government. And here's looking at you, Spokesman Review Copy Desk. That criticism comes from a man who has been recognized for his work in greater government transparency by the Washington Newspaper Publishers Association and the Washington Coalition for Open Government, and was installed in the State Government Hall of Fame by the National Freedom of Information Coalition and the Society of Professional Journalists. There were other comments affirming the issue of electric-only heat is already controversial. In an email from Vaughn, I think Brian Beggs should first try a heat pump in his own home before promoting it for all Spokaneites and Washingtonians. Heat pumps are worthless in the winter temps we have in the inland Northwest. They would not keep a house warm even in Arkansas winters, which is not a prolonged cold like it is here. I froze to death all winter when using a heat pump when I lived there. My advice for Mr. Beggs is try it, but you won't like it. Vaughn is passing on his personal experience with his heat pump. It was not adequate to keep up with the cold. Paul from Spokane took an issue with City Council President Brian Beggs' handling of the issue, saying, thanks for exposing the obviously duplicitous and or confused Brian Beggs and bringing to light this electrification crusade all the greeny lefty whack jobs are promoting, or as Mike Fitzsimmons used to pontificate on radio, the ones who think with their heart. And imagine that one-trick pony, Climate J the Govtator, who would let the opportunity to skew the deck pass on the SBCC. Finally, today, in that lengthy piece on this topic, Avista was able to address the elephant in the room of the carbon-neutral crowd, the grid. Reminds me of an old ad for, I think, FedEx, where some guy constantly says, we can do that, in answer to questions about service, and then he pauses and asks, how are we going to do that? Well, Paul, that's the question that keeps getting shoved aside by people who, I picture them as thinking that if you buy an outlet splitter so you can plug in twice as many appliances, that you have more power without realizing there has to be more power first. And finally, this email from Jerry. Thank you for your opinion piece in the Spokesman Review. There is a lot about the green agenda and the use of unelected accountability that needs to be questioned, so I support in principle the spirit of your article. Yet the piece would have benefited from a little more explanation on what it means to go electric because, like I said, I am concerned about these new rules, but I am not aware of the consequences. I don't know what it means, in other words. Perhaps the article didn't need this background information because the Spokane readership would be knowledgeable about the issue, but I would have appreciated it as someone who is interested in the rising costs of construction and affordable housing brought about because of my role as a housing nonprofit volunteer. Nonetheless, thank you. And Jerry, that goes back to the previous comment. We can't keep increasing the load without discussion, serious discussion on what it takes to produce and distribute that power. And at its most basic, that starts with mining. The same progressive voices crying for more power, are also the ones who prefer to celebrate stopping new mining permits rather than working to open up new sources of the copper that will be required to move that power. As economist and philosopher Thomas Sowell has often said, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. That's why we have a legislature where trade-offs between many policies should be fully debated. Unelected, unaccountable technical councils focused on single solutions ignore the inevitable trade-offs.